Rowan said. The silence in the room shifted, turning from the warmth of mutual understanding to the chilling weight of reality. Alek's hand was still wrapped around Rowan's, but his expression grew somber as the reality of Rowan's proposal settled in.
If we do this, Rowan, we aren't just fighting a PR battle,
Alek said, his voice dropping into a register of deadly seriousness.
We are stepping onto a legal landmine.
Rowan knew exactly what Alek meant. In Eastridge, scent registration wasn't just a formality, it was the backbone of the social and legal hierarchy. By filing his paperwork as a dominant alpha while biologically existing as a beta, Rowan had committed categorical identity fraud. In the eyes of the High Council, this wasn't just a lie, it was a subversion of the state.
You'd be a warning. They would make an example of you. They'd strip you of your identity. You'd be a ghost, Rowan. A man with no scent and no history.
Rowan didn't flinch. He had lived as a ghost for 10 years. The only difference now was that the world would finally see the haunting.
I've been a ghost since I was 19, Alek,
Rowan replied, his voice steady despite the terrifying stakes.
I've lived in a shell of pine and leather that doesn't belong to me. If I stay in it, I die anyway, just more slowly. I'd rather face the stripping than spend another day suffocating under a scent patch.
He looked down at their joined hands. A gentle lift of the corner of his mouth revealed his calm determination of his decision.
If we win, we change the laws. If we lose, well, I was never meant to survive the Adams legacy anyway. But if I'm going down as the man who showed this city that a beta's mind is worth more than an alpha's birthright.
Alek's fingers wrapped around Rowan's hand, an alpha's protective instinct flaring behind his eyes, though he respected Rowan too much to countermand his resolve.
Then we don't lose. Tonight, with this donor, we don't lead with the fraud. We lead with the evolution. If we get the anonymous money on our side first, we build a war chest that can buy the best legal defense Eastridge has ever seen.
He stood up, pulling Rowan with him.
Wear the suit. Keep the patch on for tonight. One last time. We choose the moment of the reveal. We don't let the law choose it for us.
Rowan nodded, the very real possibility of the social death hanging over him like a death sentence. Yet, for the first time in his life, his lungs felt clear. He was a fraud, a target, and a revolutionary.
One last time,
Rowan agreed. Chapter 24. The Charity. The air in the cliffside estate was nearly suffocating, a thick slurry of vintage wine and the aggressive pheromones of the Eastridge elite. The alphas were in peak display, shoulders braced like shields, their scents, heavy oak, sharp pepper, and musk, clashing in the air like invisible gladiators. To their left and right, the Omegas acted as the intended audience, draped in jewels and floral scents, the silent prizes for whoever could roar the loudest about policy.
The problem with the current administration,
one alpha boomed, his scent of burnt oak flaring as he leaned toward a young Omega who was clearly there to be seen and not heard,
is a lack of traditional fortitude. We need leadership that understands the natural order. You can't give a beta a seat at the table and expect them not to crumble when the pressure mounts. It's a matter of biological stamina.
Rowan sat perfectly still in his stormwater blue suit. Beneath his collar, the synthetic pine patch Alek had requested he wear one last time felt like a branding iron. He was being discussed as if he were a ghost in the room, a mere tool of the Silverson legacy. Slowly, Rowan set his crystal glass down. The sharp clink against the marble table was quiet, but it commanded a sudden, jagged silence.
Stamina is an interesting metric to choose, Councilman,
Rowan said. His voice wasn't a roar. It was a scalpel. Cool, precise, and impossible to ignore.
Especially since the Q3 labor statistics show that beta-led firms in the lower district have maintained a 14% higher retention rate during market volatility than alpha-led conglomerates.
The councilman stiffened, his scent spiking with irritation.
Statistics can be massaged, Adams. It's about the presence in the room, the ability to command.
Command is the last resort of the incompetent,
Rowan countered, his blue eyes locking onto the older man with a terrifying, steady clarity.
You speak of crumbling under pressure, yet your own firm's last 3 infrastructure bids were rejected not for lack of fortitude, but for a 22% margin of error in the logistics. While you were focused on the natural order of the boardroom, a team of betas in my office identified the fiscal leak that was bleeding your pack dry.
Rowan leaned forward over the dining table, the light of the chandelier catching the sharp, cold edge of his expression.
The data suggests that the fortitude you're describing is actually just a high-volume excuse for strategic stagnation. If we want the city to move forward, we should probably stop evaluating policy based on the strength of a pheromone flare and start looking at the strength of the ledger.
The silence that followed was the proof of Rowan calling out a failed system, a failed mindset. The Alpha's burnt oak scent soured, turning stagnant, while the Omegas at the table shifted their gazes. One young Omega nearby caught Rowan's eye, offering him a sweet, lingering smile of genuine admiration. It was an invitation, a softening of the atmosphere, but Rowan felt no reason to indulge it. He didn't need the prize of a smile. He had the victory of the truth. He turned back to his plate. His posture remained straight. He wasn't just in the room anymore. He had dismantled it. Beside him, Alek didn't say a word, but the scent of black cedar flared with a quiet, incandescent pride that Rowan felt against his skin like morning sun warming the chill of the world. Across the table, Martin Sharp sat like a stone in a rushing river. He was a beta, wealthy enough to be invited but quiet enough to be overlooked. He didn't join the posturing. He didn't flare his nostrils or broaden his chest. Instead, his eyes, cool and analytical, never left Rowan. He watched how Rowan didn't flinch when a nearby Alpha slammed a hand on the table. He watched how Rowan's blue eyes dissected every political argument with a surgeon's precision. Sharp saw the mask, and he saw the man behind it.
"I've heard enough,"
Sharp said suddenly, cutting through a heated debate about border security. He rose, his voice quiet but possessing a gravitational pull that gained the attention from the Alphas.
"Alek, Mr. Adams, a word in the library, if I may."
Alek abandoned his napkin, the fine linen a dramatic white against the mahogany table, and rose with a silent, predatory grace. He was grateful for any excuse to escape the suffocating heat of the Alpha's posturing and the Omega's shallow smiles. He followed Rowan into the shadows of the library, the doors clicking shut behind them with a finality that made the air in the hallway feel suddenly thin. Walking behind Rowan, Alek felt his mating instincts flare, a raw, territorial thrum in his blood that hadn't settled since the desperate, bone-deep passion of the previous night. They were stepping into the lion's den with a secret that could destroy them both, and the silent, watchful gaze of Mr. Sharp felt less like an invitation and more like a trap waiting to be sprung. The library was a sanctuary of leather-bound books and silence. Sharp didn't waste time. He pulled an envelope from his breast pocket and laid it on the polished cherry desk. Inside was a check, a figure so large it didn't just cover the campaign, it bought the future.
This is for the transition, and the fight that comes after,
Sharp said. Rowan looked at the check, then at Alek. The bond that had come alive between them, forged in the quiet moments of the night before, pulsed like a heartbeat. Alek didn't need to speak. The way his black cedar scent softened, turning warm and encouraging, gave Rowan the answer. It said, "Your choice. I am with you." Rowan took a deep breath, reached up, and slowly loosened his tie and unbuttoned the top of his shirt. He didn't peel the patch off, but it was visible for Sharp to see, as was the claiming mark from Alek. He watched Sharp's eyes move to the scent patch, to the red, healing skin peeking out from behind the starched collar, then back to Rowan's eyes.
Mr. Sharp,
Rowan began, his voice dropping the manufactured Alpha gravel. It was clear, resonant, and entirely human.
I cannot take this under false pretenses. You are betting on a campaign led by an Alpha strategist. But the mind you are credited with stabilizing, Alek, it isn't Alpha.
Alek stepped closer to Rowan, his hand coming to rest firmly on Rowan's shoulder. A public claim of a private truth.
I am a beta, have faked my registration, my scent, and my life to get into this room. If you fund us, you are funding a fraud in the eyes of the law. I didn't want you to feel like you bet on the wrong horse.
The silence that followed was the first honest thing Rowan had felt in years. Sharp didn't look shocked. Instead, he let out a long, weary exhale and leaned back against the desk. A slow smile spread across his face, the look of a man who had finally found what he was searching for.
I am 64 years old, Mr. Adams,
Sharp said quietly.
I am a beta who has spent 40 of those years throwing money at alphas who promised to fix the system. And every single one of them eventually became the problem. They couldn't help it. Their biology demanded they protect the hierarchy that put them on top.
He stepped forward, looking at Rowan with a fierce, paternal pride.
I suspected,
Sharp admitted.
The news, the whispers in my circles. But hearing you say it? That's what I was waiting for. You aren't the wrong horse, Rowan. You're the only one actually running the race.
Sharp took Rowan's hand, his grip surprisingly strong.
You will be the first of many. We are not invisible. We are the architects, the builders, and the heart of this city. Our actions are impactful, and from tonight on, we will no longer be silenced or glossed over. You aren't just winning an election, son. You're ending an era.
Rowan felt those words lift a heavy weight in his chest. He wasn't a liability. He was a pioneer. Sharp turned his gaze toward Alek, his expression softening from clinical observation to a profound, rare respect. He didn't just see a candidate standing there. He saw the future of the hierarchy being dismantled from the inside.
And you, Mr. Silverson,
Sharp said, his voice thickening with emotion.
do not think for a second that your role in this has gone unnoticed. It is one thing for a beta to fight for his life. It is quite another for a dominant alpha of your pedigree to step aside and say, I am not the only voice that matters.
Sharp gestured to the door they had just exited, where the dull roar of alpha posturing still reverberated through the wood.
Most men in your position would have used a mind like Rowan's as a tool, a silent engine to propel them into power, while they took all the credit. They would have kept him in the shadows, or worse, used their own scent to drown him out. But you didn't just give him a job, Alek. You gave him the one thing the elite have tried to deny betas for centuries: a platform of equal footing.
Alek squeezed Rowan's shoulder, the warmth of his hand seeping through the stormwater blue fabric.
He earned the platform, Martin. I'm just the one lucky enough to be standing on it with him.
Sharp shook his head slowly, a gentle, knowing smile on his lips.
You did more than that. By standing beside him, by shielding his true nature until he was ready to reveal it, you've shown that the natural order the men out there are screaming about is a cage for alphas too. You've chosen competence over caste. You've chosen a partner over a pawn. The money in that folder is for the campaign,
Sharp continued.
but my loyalty is to the precedent you are setting.
Rowan looked up at Alek, seeing the way the library's amber light made the lavender in his eyes blaze with determination. For the first time, the Alpha manager felt no need to calculate the risk. The investment wasn't just in the politics. It was in the man standing next to him.
Thank you, Martin.
Alek said, his voice steady and resonant, free of any defensive edge.
We won't waste the opportunity.
Sharp nodded, a final, sharp glint in his eye.
I know you won't. Now, button your shirt, Mr. Adams. We have a room full of predators out there who have no idea they've already been out-hunted.
Chapter 25. The Invitation. The drive back from the Sharp estate felt like the inside of a pressure cooker. The high of the endorsement was still thrumming in Rowan's veins, but it was the silence between him and Alek that carried the most weight. Every time Alek shifted gears, the scent of black cedar and winter ozone flared, thick and possessive, reacting to the raw, unmasked honesty of Rowan's confession in the library. When the car finally purred to a halt in the underground garage of Alek's private residence, neither of them moved for a long moment. The engine ticked as it cooled, the only sound in the dim concrete space. Finally, Alek turned in his seat. In the shadows of the car, his lavender eyes looked almost dark, the pupils blown wide with a biological intensity he was no longer trying to hide.
Come inside,
Alek said. His voice wasn't just low. It was a physical vibration that settled directly into Rowan's soul.
The world is going to start screaming at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. I don't want you in that apartment worrying about the fallout all alone. Come home with me.
Rowan looked at him, his own breath hitching. The word home felt like a sanctuary he wasn't sure he was allowed to enter.
Alek, if I stay, the lines won't just be blurred. They'll be gone.
They've already burned, Rowan.
Alek murmured. He reached across the center console, his hand sliding behind Rowan's neck, his thumb grazing the sensitive skin where the patch had been only hours before.
I don't want the manager tonight. I want the man who stood up to alphas and wasn't afraid. I want the rain. Your rain.
The door to the penthouse softly clicked shut, and the world outside, the scent registry, the looming legal threats, vanished. Alek didn't turn on the overhead lights. Instead, he walked to the vintage audio system and selected a recording of Orloff Vyatka. As the first deep pull of the bow across the cello strings filled the room, the music acted as a catalyst. Vyatka's tone was carnal, a woody, resonant ache that mirrored the tension building between them.
Sit,
Alek commanded. It wasn't a political order. It was the soft, low growl of an alpha who had been patient for far too long. Rowan sank into the heavy leather armchair, his body feeling liquid. He watched as Alek discarded his own jacket, the white silk of his shirt straining against the muscles of his back. Alek moved behind him, his hands settling on Rowan's shoulders. He didn't just massage, he claimed.
You were incredible tonight, Rowan,
Alek whispered, leaning down until his lips were inches from the shell of Rowan's ear. The cello music swelled, a minor key lament that made Rowan's heart hammer.
I watched you in that room at dinner. You didn't just change the room, Rowan. You were changing minds. Every person in there was vibrating at your frequency.
Alek's hand slid down to Rowan's chest, his thumbs moving slowly along the line of his collarbone.
I looked at you and I thought, I couldn't imagine you being more powerful or more beautiful. When you were in your element, Rowan, you are truly a force to be reckoned with.
Rowan's eyes fluttered shut, his head falling back against Alek's stomach. He could feel the heat radiating off the alpha, the steady, rhythmic thrum of a heart that beat in time with his own.
Alek,
Rowan gasped, his voice thin and starved.
if you don't stop, I won't be able to think about the campaign tomorrow.
Alek's grip tightened, pulling Rowan closer until there was no air left between them.
Then don't think about it.
Alek rasped, his scent turning into the heavy electric charge of a storm about to break.
Just feel. Feel me, Rowan. Let someone else hold the weight.
The atmosphere in the penthouse didn't settle. It began to thicken with an unnatural, stifling heat. As the final seductive notes of Vyatka's cello faded, the silence that followed felt heavy, charged with a static that made the fine hairs on Rowan's arms stand up. Alek suddenly pulled away, his hands dropping from Rowan's shoulders as if he'd been burned. He stumbled back a step, his breathing becoming ragged, a harsh sound in the quiet room. His scent of black cedar and winter ozone was no longer a comforting cocoon. It was sharpening, turning into something jagged, primal, and overwhelmingly potent.
Alek?
Rowan asked, turning in the chair. His own heart was racing, his internal beta senses screaming that the air had just become dangerous. Alek wiped a hand across his forehead, which was slick with a sudden, localized sweat. His lavender eyes were bloodshot, the pupils fixed into narrow slits that tracked Rowan's every movement with a terrifying, predatory focus. He looked feverish, his skin flushed a deep, burning red beneath the collar of his white shirt.
I think I've caught something,
Alek rasped, his voice sounding like grinding stone. He gripped the back of the sofa, his knuckles turning white.
The stress of the campaign, the dinner. It must be a fever. My head is swimming.
Rowan stood, stepping toward him with instinctive concern, and placed the back of his hand to Alek's forehead.
You're burning up, Alek. Let me call a doctor, or at least get you some.
No!
Alek's bark was sharp, a pure alpha reflex that made Rowan recoil. Alek immediately looked pained by his own outburst. He squeezed his eyes shut, his chest heaving as he fought against a tide of biology he didn't yet recognize. He had found his match, his anchor, and his body was beginning to mobilize for the first time in years, shifting into the aggressive, single-minded state of an early rut. But to Alek, who had always been the master of his own composure, now it felt like a sickness, a delirium.
You need to go.
Alek managed to choke out, gesturing toward the hallway.
The guest room at the end of the hall. It's secure. Sleep there tonight, Rowan. I don't want to give you whatever this is. I just need to sleep it off.
Rowan hesitated, sensing the sheer wall of heat radiating off the man. The spring rain of his own scent was being sucked into the vacuum of Alek's intensifying storm.
Are you sure? You look...
Go, please.
Alek groaned, his body coiling as if he were trying to physically restrain himself from lunging forward to capture Rowan in his arms.